can drown you in fines. Goodbye, bakes, race, chic.
Funny, and hey, you'll drown in the truth.
The mud was still wet when Claudia Renshaw pointed her manicured finger toward my land. "You've built that retaining wall too close to the easement," she said, voice steady as a judge's gavel. Behind her, 3 board members nodded like disciples. The clipboard queen always traveled with a following, an entourage of signatures waiting to happen. I kept my eyes on the trench that had appeared overnight. New, raw, wrong. "That wall's been there since my father poured it," I said. "You redirected the runoff. You moved the river." She smiled, the kind that came from knowing the rules and how to weaponize them. "Mr. Vance, we improved the community's drainage system. You should thank us. Water finds its own path." That was her mistake. She thought this was about dirt. I let her words hang in the humid morning air, the sound of pumps whirring in the distance. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "You didn't improve it. You violated the Army Corps permit. I know because I signed the original environmental report 12 years ago." Her confidence flickered, just for a breath, but the enforcer in crimson recovered quickly. "Those records are outdated." She snapped the clipboard shut like a verdict. "You'll receive a notice by mail." And just like that, she turned away, red heels sinking slightly into the damp earth she had condemned herself with. If you've ever stood your ground while someone tried to rewrite the truth under your feet, keep watching and hit subscribe right now, because this isn't just a fight over water. I'm Marcus Vance, civil engineer. My father taught me to respect the flow of rivers, not to command them. When he died, I promised I'd never let this land, the one he built by hand, be turned into concrete for profit. That promise is the only reason I still wake up before dawn, walking the banks that used to hum with frogs and willows. Claudia called it wasted potential. I called it sacred ground. 2 weeks before that confrontation, I'd noticed the stakes in the soil, tiny orange flags marching toward my boundary line. They'd marked the new Community Beautification Zone, an HOA vanity project she'd pushed through without a proper vote. By the time I protested, excavators were already chewing into the riverbed, turning a living ecosystem into a drainage ditch. At first, I tried diplomacy. Emails, permits, meeting minutes, all ignored. The officer of rules had declared the river hers to command. Neighbors began whispering. Some loved the new walking path. Others watched their lawns sink. But few dared oppose the board chair. She had a talent for making defiance expensive. Late fees, citations, legal threats thinly veiled as reminders. Then came the notice taped to my door. Unauthorized structure adjacent to HOA-controlled property. Fine, $5,000. Deadline, 7 days. I didn't tear it down, I framed it. Because by then, I'd already seen the water turning opaque. The redirected channel was carving deep beneath the new Clubhouse foundation, a $500,000 centerpiece she'd boasted about in the county magazine. I'd warned them once. I'd sent photos, soil tests, the math. They laughed. I kept the data. The clipboard queen believed rules could rewrite physics. But rivers don't negotiate, and neither do promises made to fathers who died, believing integrity still meant something. That night, thunder rolled through the valley. I stood at the edge of the half-finished clubhouse, flashlight catching on rebar and fresh concrete. The current below sounded hungrier than usual. I recorded the water levels, every inch rising faster than the last. Behind me, lights glowed from her office window. Claudia Renshaw, the tyrant in heels, still at her desk past midnight, calculating fines while the river calculated revenge. I whispered to myself, half prayer, half warning. "You moved it, Claudia, but soon it'll move you." The next morning, the pumps failed. The first crack appeared beneath the clubhouse floor, and that was when the real story began. By dawn, the clubhouse lawn looked like a wound. The concrete apron had split clean across the middle, a pale seam filled with muddy water that kept bubbling as if something beneath it was breathing. I'd seen that kind of fissure before, during a levee failure in Sacramento. It starts invisible, then eats everything. Claudia Renshaw arrived just after 7, stilettos clicking on the walkway, cell phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't panicked, she was annoyed, like nature had personally insulted her authority. "Yes, maintenance will handle it," she said sharply into the receiver. "No, it's not structural, it's cosmetic. Do not email the insurance adjuster yet." The clipboard queen hated losing control of a narrative. She spotted me across the parking lot, coffee in hand, and that signature smirk reappeared. "Mr. Vance, I see you've come to admire your handiwork." I gestured toward the crack stretching toward the riverbank. "That's not mine, ma'am. That's hydrology doing its job." Her voice dropped into that practiced HOA cadence, professional condescension wrapped in civility. You were warned about unapproved modifications. Your wall is forcing pressure back toward our property. I wanted to laugh, but instead I pointed to the erosion marks behind her maintenance shed. You diverted a tributary without understanding the subsurface gradient. I've got flow data from the county sensors proving it. Her jaw tightened, eyes flicking briefly toward her two board members standing nearby. She couldn't let me speak too long in front of them. Marcus, we have procedures for grievances. You're free to file another complaint. I already did, I said. You stamped closed, no action on it. The enforcer in crimson turned briskly, motioning her entourage back toward the clubhouse doors. But I saw something she didn't. A shimmer beneath the cracked walkway where a small stream had begun to seep through. The land was talking, even if she refused to listen. I crouched, running my fingers across the damp soil. It was warm, freshly shifted, a hollow echo beneath. That meant undercutting. She had no idea how fast it was happening. By noon, half the neighborhood had wandered out to look. Some whispered, others recorded with their phones. When the tyrant in heels returned for her second inspection of the day, she wore a red jacket that caught the sunlight like armor. "Everyone, step back," she commanded, voice echoing over the water. "This is a private matter under HOA jurisdiction." Someone from the crowd muttered, "It's our money, too." I didn't say it out loud, but the truth was already spreading, both literally and figuratively. The clubhouse foundation had begun to sink. That night, I set up my survey equipment on the opposite bank. The readings confirmed what I feared. The redirected trench had increased downstream velocity by 37%. It was carving straight under their $1 million monument. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did gravity. I sent the data again, this time copying the county flood management office. No accusations, just metrics. Let them read between the lines. A reply came from a junior engineer named Victor Nguyen. "Interesting data, Mr. Vance. Are you sure these measurements are post-redirection?" I sent the time-stamped photos. "Got it," he replied. "If your HOA performed unpermitted modifications to the channel, it's a violation of Section 404. Keep documenting." That was the moment the tide shifted. Not physically yet, but bureaucratically. The officer of rules had weaponized paperwork for years. Now paperwork would turn on her. The next morning, she confronted me outside my fence line, voice low, almost trembling with anger. "You went over my head." "No," I said, meeting her stare. "You went below the water table." Her lips pressed into a line. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're jeopardizing property values for everyone." "Funny," I said. "So did you. You just used a backhoe." The clipboard queen stood there for a beat too long. For the first time, her confidence looked borrowed. Behind her, the clubhouse lights flickered from a shorted circuit board. Water intrusion, almost poetic. That night, rain came again, heavier this time. The gutters overflowed, the pumps groaned, and somewhere beneath all that noise, I swear I heard the river laughing. By midnight, half the parking lot had vanished into the earth. The board chair would still call it minor settling in her morning press release. But deep down, she must have known. This was only the beginning. The morning after the second storm, the clubhouse. Lawn looked worse. A sinkhole had opened right under the new flagpole. An emblem of pride turned into a warning post. Trucks came, workers paced, and Claudia Renshaw arrived last, designer coat draped over her shoulders like a crown. She didn't look at the hole, she looked at me. "Mr. Vance," she said, her tone smooth as fresh paint. "You've been circulating alarming messages to homeowners. That stops today." Her words carried the chill of legal preparation. The clipboard queen had probably spent the night drafting her next threat letter. I didn't move from the riverbank. "I'm circulating facts, Claudia. You built on unstable ground. I've got the soil cores to prove it." Behind her, I noticed Renee Porter, the HOA secretary. She wasn't taking notes this time, just staring at the ground, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She'd once thanked me for helping her fix her irrigation line. Now she wouldn't meet my eyes. The conflicted witness had arrived, though she didn't know her title yet. Claudia turned to her. "Renee, document this. Mr. Vance is trespassing." Renee's voice came small but steady. "He's standing on his own property." The tyrant in heels didn't like that. She pivoted, heels digging into mud that refused to obey her authority. "Fine. Then note his defamation. The board will issue a community bulletin." That was how she fought. Paper over truth, ink over evidence. The rain had stopped, but the air still held the metallic scent of runoff. Down by the culvert, I could see the waterline had risen another 6 inches overnight. The redirected channel was clawing through the foundation's belly faster than even I predicted. "Look at it," I said quietly. "You can see the current cutting under your precious clubhouse. Another week and you'll lose the foundation." The officer of rules decides what's lost or saved, she shot back. I smiled, but not kindly. The river doesn't ask permission. She stepped closer. You've made this personal, Marcus. We were improving the community. You've turned it into a crusade. I wanted to say you turned it into collateral damage, but the words caught. There was no point arguing with someone who thought fines were justice. Her phone rang. She turned away, voice snapping orders to the maintenance lead. As she walked off, I caught Renee's eye again. She looked torn, like a bridge straining under too much load. Renee, I said softly, you saw the invoices, right? They never got the floodplain permit. She hesitated, fingers gripping her tablet. I can't talk about that. You just did, I said. She froze, realizing it. Her eyes darted toward Claudia, who was still on the call, oblivious. They told me the paperwork was handled, she whispered. But when I checked the county system, nothing came up. That was all I needed, a single thread to unravel a woven lie. By afternoon, the HOA chat board exploded. Homeowners were posting photos of cracks in their driveways, sink marks in their lawns. The enforcer in crimson tried to silence it, labeling posts misinformation. But truth doesn't stay buried long in wet soil. That evening, the board chair sent a mass email. We are aware of minor drainage concerns. Please refrain from speculation. Minor. She used the word minor for a 2-foot cavity beneath a public structure. Renee forwarded me that email from her personal address. No message, just the subject line. You were right. For the first time, I sensed guilt cracking her loyalty. That night, I stood alone on my porch, flashlight trained on the river's bend. The water shimmered, whispering through reeds like it knew what was coming. I thought of my father's voice again. You can't damn arrogance. It floods on its own. Somewhere behind me, I heard tires crunching gravel. Claudia's SUV rolled by slow, windows tinted, engine humming low. She didn't stop, just stared through the glass as she passed. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It watches first. The clipboard queen had declared her war in bylaws. I was about to answer in floodlines. 3 days after Renee's quiet confession, the air in Riverstone Estates carried the unease of a town waiting for bad news. The ground felt spongy beneath every step, as though the earth itself had begun keeping secrets. I'd warned them in every way I knew how. Emails, models, drone photos, but the board chair still called it community improvement. That morning, Claudia Renshaw stood near the clubhouse, her red jacket vivid against a sky the color of wet slate. She was surrounded by contractors and one city liaison, a poor soul from zoning who looked like he wanted to vanish into his clipboard. We'll reinforce the retaining walls, she announced. No structural risk exists to the community. It was theater, cheap, confident, and doomed. I stayed on the opposite side of the lot, measuring with my transit level. From my angle, the riverbank had receded another 2 feet. The enforcer in crimson caught me watching. She smirked, then turned her back, a move calculated to humiliate without a word. She didn't know I'd already filed the complaint with the county's flood management division, and they'd acknowledged receipt. The officer of rules might command a board, but the river answered to federal law. Later that afternoon, a black SUV rolled up my driveway. Out stepped a man in a gray windbreaker, Victor Nguyen, the engineer who'd replied to my data email. Mr. Vance, he said, shaking my hand. I saw the readings. You were right. They rerouted the natural floodway. No permits. It's a violation. Finally, someone else said it aloud. We walked the edge of the bank, Victor filming with his phone. This is textbook negligence, he muttered. One major rainfall, and this whole grade could shear. That was when I noticed Renee across the water, standing near the clubhouse balcony. She wasn't holding her tablet, just her arms. She looked like someone watching a slow-motion disaster she couldn't stop. Claudia came out moments later, heels clacking against wet boards. Mr. Vance, she shouted across the gap. Trespassing on HOA-managed soil again? I raised my voice over the wind. You might want to check your jurisdiction map before throwing that word around. The river shifted your boundary by 12 feet. You're standing on what's now technically mine. Her face froze for a second, then hardened into fury. You think you're clever? You're sabotaging this neighborhood's reputation. The river did that, I said. I'm just measuring it. The clipboard queen stalked back inside, muttering into her phone. Probably her attorney or the PR firm she used whenever her empire cracked. Victor glanced at me. You've got her rattled. I need more than that, I replied. I need proof that she ordered the redirection. He nodded toward Renee. Your witness looks like she's halfway there. That night, the storm returned, heavy and vindictive. I sat in my truck near the culvert, windshield wipers slashing at the dark, watching the water surge. It roared past like a freight train, carrying branches, debris, pieces of lawn edging. I recorded it all. Around midnight, I saw headlights again. Claudia's SUV, parking crooked near the clubhouse. She stepped out with an umbrella, staring at the swollen current. Her red coat looked like a warning flare under the floodlights. For a moment, she wasn't the tyrant in heels, just a woman realizing she'd built too close to something she couldn't control. Then she spotted me. The mask came back instantly. Still playing vigilante, Marcus? Still pretending you're in charge? The board will pursue legal action. Then you'd better hurry, I said, before the evidence floats away. Lightning flashed, illuminating the water gnawing at the clubhouse foundation. She looked down, saw the movement, and for the first time, stepped back. Instinct, not pride. I rolled down my window, voice low, but cutting through the storm. You can't negotiate with gravity, Claudia. It doesn't care about bylaws. She didn't respond, just turned and hurried toward her car. By morning, half the parking lot was gone, and buried somewhere under all that mud was her denial. By sunrise, the sky looked bruised, the kind that promised another storm by nightfall. The air smelled of copper and clay, freshly broken ground, the kind that warned of collapse. I was already knee-deep in evidence, both literal and legal. Claudia Renshaw arrived at the edge of the sinking lot in a black raincoat, her signature red heels swapped for waterproof boots. A rare concession from the enforcer in crimson. Her tone, though, hadn't softened. "You're trespassing again, Marcus," she called out. "Or is this your version of therapy?" I stood near the erosion line, surveying rod in hand. "Therapy usually doesn't end in lawsuits," I said, "but yours might." Her jaw twitched. The clipboard queen motioned to a maintenance worker carrying sandbags. "We're stabilizing the area," she declared to anyone listening. "Everything is under control." Control, that word again. Claudia treated it like a weapon, a word she could swing at reality until it obeyed. But nature didn't negotiate, and neither did data. I crouched near the bank and snapped a photo. Timestamp, GPS tag, water depth. Then I looked up and caught her watching me, calculating, trying to find the weak point she could exploit. "You think those little gadgets of yours scare me?" she said. "I've dealt with your type before, men who think degrees make them invincible." I met her stare. Not invincible, just right. Her expression flickered, a crack in the armor. It was small, but real. That afternoon, Renee showed up at my porch, hood up, raincoat soaked. Her eyes darted around as if every drop of water might be recording her. "Claudia's furious," she whispered. "She called an emergency board session tonight. They're drafting a cease and desist against you." I gestured her inside. "You didn't come here to warn me about that, did you?" Renee hesitated, twisting her fingers. I checked the HOA's project folder. Claudia signed off on the river redirection personally, no permits. She even overrode the contractor's safety note. My pulse kicked. "Do you have copies?" She nodded. "Not yet, but I can get them. They're stored on the internal drive." She thinks I deleted the backups, but I didn't. The conflicted witness had just crossed the line between silence and courage. "Renee," I said quietly, "if you're caught—" "I know," she interrupted, "but I can't keep lying for her." That night, I watched from my truck as the board gathered inside the clubhouse. Through the rain-blurred windows, I saw the clipboard queen at the head of the table, posture rigid, gestures sharp. The tyrant in heels was rallying her loyalists one last time. At exactly 9:42 p.m., my phone buzzed, an encrypted message from Renee. "Sent the files. Download fast. Don't reply." I opened the folder. It was all there. Authorization forms, budget reallocation memos, and an email chain from Claudia herself. "If we divert the runoff west, it'll give us another 5 acres of usable land." The engineer's warnings are exaggerated. Exaggerated. The word burned through me. Within an hour, I packaged the evidence and forwarded it to Victor Nguyen, the county engineer. My message was short. "You'll want to see this before the next rainfall." By midnight, thunder rolled again, low and hungry. I went outside and stood on my porch, watching the water surge down the embankment. The river had grown teeth. Across the way, the officer of rules stepped out onto the clubhouse balcony, umbrella snapping in the wind. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face, not of me, but of the land itself. She looked at the waterline crawling closer and shouted something into her phone. Her voice was swallowed by the storm. A light flashed near her feet, a circuit shorting from the soaked outlets. She stumbled back, grabbing the railing. For a heartbeat, she locked eyes with me through the dark, and in that moment, even she knew. She wasn't fighting me anymore. She was fighting everything she'd built her empire on. When lightning split the sky, the foundation groaned like an old wound reopening. The river had found its way home. By dawn, the river had turned the color of slate and ash. It moved slower now, heavier, like it was deciding who to take next. I stood in my rain jacket, boots sinking into mud that used to be Claudia Renshaw's prized walking trail. The irony wasn't lost on me. The board chair arrived minutes later, her SUV grinding through the flooded curb. Even now, with half the HOA's main road eaten by water, she carried herself like the enforcer in crimson, though her jacket today was a muted brown. She looked smaller against the landscape that no longer obeyed her. "Marcus," she called, stepping out. "You're still out here? The county already knows about your stunt." "My stunt?" I echoed. "You redirected a living river. It's not a ditch you can fill with press releases." She slammed the door. "You're obsessed. Every neighborhood has one. Someone who needs a villain to feel important." Lightning cracked across the gray. For a brief moment, the clipboard queen's face was illuminated, wet hair plastered, eyes tight with something that wasn't anger anymore. Fear, maybe. "I'm not your villain, Claudia," I said quietly. "But you made yourself mine," she scoffed, turning toward the swollen bank. "You've poisoned this community with paranoia. The homeowners are terrified because of you." "Terrified because they're realizing you lied," I said. "And they've started calling me instead of you. That's your real problem, isn't it?" She didn't answer. The officer of rules wasn't used to silence. She only spoke in decrees. But when the earth trembles beneath your jurisdiction, the bylaws stop listening. Behind us, the maintenance team was already stacking sandbags, too late to matter. Renee arrived with them, rain dripping from her hood. Her face was pale but determined. "Marcus," she whispered, "the county engineer's report came through. They confirmed illegal alteration of flood channels. They're sending inspectors this afternoon." Claudia spun. "You had no right to leak that." Renee's voice cracked but held. "The public had a right to know." The tyrant in heels froze. It was the first time anyone had spoken back to her in front of witnesses. For years, she'd ruled by embarrassment and paperwork, but now the witnesses were watching her unravel. "Renee," she hissed, "I took you in when no one else would." "No," Renee interrupted, shaking. "You took my silence." The confrontation cut through the storm louder than thunder. Even the maintenance crew pretended to find new work to do, their eyes flicking between us. I stepped closer to Claudia. "You can't intimidate everyone forever. The river's giving you a refund, every cubic foot you stole." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She turned toward the clubhouse, her empire now framed by sandbags and warnings. By noon, Victor Seguin arrived with county inspectors and a drone team. Cameras whirred overhead, capturing the scope of the damage. Claudia tried to intercept them, flashing her HOA credentials like a badge of power. "This is private property," she insisted. Victor just raised an eyebrow. "Not anymore, ma'am. FEMA jurisdiction. You moved a federal waterway without authorization." The clipboard queen's mask cracked right there in the mud. Her voice faltered. "That can't be. There was a variance." "There wasn't," I said. "You signed off yourself, remember?" She turned to me, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this." "Already did," I said, "the moment I trusted you to do the right thing." The inspectors began cordoning off the clubhouse zone. The ground vibrated with each step as if echoing judgment. I caught Renee's eye across the chaos, her nod small but steady. The silent witness had become the pivot. Claudia tried one last time to save face, shouting, "We'll rebuild! This is temporary!" But even as she spoke, the retaining wall groaned, a long, deep sound like the exhale of something ancient and tired. Cracks spidered across the concrete, and water began to gush through. People screamed, running back. I didn't move. I watched the river reclaim what was its own. And in that moment, I realized some victories don't need noise, they just need gravity. The storm had finally passed, but the silence it left behind was worse. Every yard in Riverstone Estates looked waterlogged, every porch light flickering like an apology. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, drone footage paused mid-frame, the moment the retaining wall split and the clubhouse began to tilt. It wasn't victory, it was inevitability caught on camera. A soft knock pulled me from the screen. When I opened the door, Renee stood there again, hood down this time, her hair still damp, her hands trembling. "We need to talk," she said. I nodded, letting her in. Her eyes darted to the footage on my screen. "So it's real," she whispered. "The board chair caused all of it." "Claudia Renshaw caused it," I corrected gently. "And you helped cover it, at least at first. Why now?" Her voice cracked. "Because I saw her email to the insurance adjuster. She's blaming you, Marcus. She said you tampered with the flood sensors." I exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to laugh. She's building her next illusion. She's desperate, Renee said. She's calling an emergency hearing tomorrow to vote you out of the community association entirely. She's saying you endangered lives. I leaned back in my chair. That's fine. She can hold her meeting, because by morning, the county's environmental report goes public. Renee hesitated. That's not the only thing. I looked up. She reached into her coat pocket and slid over a flash drive. There's an audio file on here. She called the construction foreman last week, ordered him to adjust the grade quietly before the inspection. I recorded it. That stopped me cold. You recorded, Claudia? She nodded. I didn't mean to. My smartwatch was paired to the office mic when she called. Her voice faltered. I've been sitting on it for days. I kept thinking she'd fix it. But after last night, I stared at the drive, the small piece of plastic that could destroy her career, or save an entire neighborhood from bankruptcy. Renee, I said carefully, if I use this, she'll know it came from you. She already knows, Renee whispered. I saw her call log. She tried reaching my number 12 times this morning. I think she suspects. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly again. Not a storm yet, just the echo of one. It fit. I stood and paced the kitchen. If we go public with this, she'll claim defamation. But if we give it to the county investigators first, Renee finished my thought. They'll authenticate it before she can spin it. I smiled faintly. You're learning fast. Her expression softened. You just taught me what fear looks like, and what courage costs. That night, I drove Renee to Victor's office downtown. He met us in the parking lot, still in his orange vest and steel toe boots. When I handed him the flash drive, his eyes widened. If this is what I think it is, Marcus, she's finished. Play it, I said. He plugged it into his laptop, and the speakers hissed with static before Claudia's voice cut through, crisp and cold. Lower the barrier by 2 feet. The inspector's drone only scans perimeter elevation. We'll adjust after certification. Her tone was calm, professional. Methodical corruption. Renee flinched hearing it. I just stared at the speaker until her voice ended. Victor nodded grimly. That's deliberate misrepresentation. The fines alone will cripple the HOA. Good, I said. Let them feel the weight they ignored. He looked between us. You're not safe if this leaks early. She's got friends in the county council. Wait until the report is sealed, then release it. I agreed. But inside, I knew. Claudia Renshaw wouldn't wait quietly. The tyrant in heels had been humiliated in front of her kingdom. She'd strike again before the truth. Reached daylight. When I dropped Renee off at her house, she paused before stepping out. You think she'll come after me? I met her gaze. She's already on her way. Renee shivered, pulling her coat tighter. As her door closed, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. Nice try, Marcus. Rivers change course. So do wars. CR. The clipboard queen was preparing her counterattack. By the next morning, the river had calmed, but Claudia Renshaw hadn't. Word spread fast that she'd called an emergency HOA meeting at the Clubhouse ruins. The audacity alone said everything. Half the neighborhood still had mud in their basements, but the enforcer in crimson wanted her thrown back. I arrived early, drone in hand, footage ready, but I didn't go inside. I wanted her to see me first, let her feel the pressure before I spoke a word. Through the shattered glass doors, she stood near a folding table, wearing her signature crimson blazer, despite the humidity. Clipboard clutched like a weapon. The clipboard queen was back in uniform. Marcus Vance, she announced the moment she saw me, voice echoing through the broken hall. You're not a member of this board, nor are you welcome on this property. I stepped over a puddle. That's funny. Neither are FEMA inspectors, but they're on their way. Her eyes narrowed. Empty threats again? Not this time, I said evenly. They've already validated the data logs. Every alteration to the flood map traces to your login credentials. Murmurs rippled through the gathered residents. Claudia's smile wavered, then hardened. Those records were falsified. I raised an eyebrow. By who? The U.S. Geological Survey? That hit. The tyrant in heels faltered just long enough for doubt to bloom among her followers. One man stepped closer, his voice uneasy. Claudia, is that true? Did we really move the river boundary? She turned on him sharply. Don't you dare question me, Harold. Everything I did was for property value preservation. Property value? I repeated. Tell that to the families who lost theirs last night. A low rumble of agreement rolled through the room. The officer of rules had finally overplayed her control card. I could see the shift, the empire beginning to fracture. Still, Claudia wasn't finished. Enough, she snapped. Mr. Vance has engaged in defamation, trespassing, and digital intrusion. I've already contacted our HOA attorney to file a restraining order. The crowd murmured again. One woman whispered, "A restraining order? Against the guy who saved our homes?" Renee entered quietly through the side door. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her hair was tied back, her steps steady. "He's telling the truth," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "I worked under Claudia. I saw the plans, I heard her orders. She lied about the safety variance." Every head turned. The room went electric. Claudia's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. "Renee!" she hissed. "You're finished." Renee met her gaze. "So is your reputation." The tension cracked like thunder. Claudia lunged forward, pointing her clipboard at me like a sword. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've unleashed." "Unleashed?" I said softly. "You redirected nature, Claudia. It's just returning the favor." The board chair's voice broke. "You arrogant!" A loud splash cut her off. Everyone turned toward the open window, water rushing over the far bank, reclaiming more of the manicured trail. Someone screamed. Renee whispered, "It's starting again." I looked toward the river and felt that same familiar mix of awe and dread. "No," I said. "It's finishing." Within minutes, the floodline swallowed the parking lot. The HOA banner peeled from its post and drifted into the current like a white flag. Claudia stood frozen, clipboard dangling uselessly from her fingers. The enforcer in crimson, the woman who believed signatures could rewrite geology, was watching her empire dissolve. She turned back to me, her expression trembling between rage and despair. "You did this," she said, voice low and shaking. "I warned you," I replied. "You laughed." The wind howled through the empty windows. For the first time, Claudia didn't answer. She just stared out at the water, her reflection bending and breaking across the surface. Renee stepped beside me, whispering, "She's going to try something desperate, isn't she?" "She already is," I said. This meeting was never about saving the HOA. It was about saving her ego. Claudia's phone rang. She looked at it, then hurled it into the rising flood. "You want a war, Marcus?" she shouted over the roar. "You've got one." I didn't flinch. "You had one. You just lost." Outside, the river took another bite of earth. The clubhouse shuddered. Somewhere deep inside, a foundation beam gave way with a groan, like an old verdict being read. And for the first time, the clipboard queen finally lowered her head. By midnight, the HOA's private chat was leaking faster than the river itself. Screenshots, budget emails, repair quotes, it was all over the neighborhood group threads. Claudia Renshaw's name had become digital wildfire. Every homeowner had seen her authorizations, her denials, and her endless signatures on cost-saving drainage realignments. But power doesn't collapse quietly, not hers. At 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by headlights slicing through my blinds. When I stepped outside, Claudia stood at the edge of my driveway in her raincoat, clipboard in hand, illuminated by her car's beams like a ghost clinging to relevance. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. The enforcer in crimson smirked faintly. "Neither could you, it seems." Her voice trembled beneath the calm. "You think this ends with your little video clips and whistleblowers? I built this community. You're just squatting in my legacy." I folded my arms. "Legacies don't drown people, Claudia." She stepped forward, rain pattering softly against the plastic sheeting of her coat. "You think you've won because a few weak neighbors turned on me? Because you and that secretary dug through files you didn't understand?" "Those files were your confession," I said. Her laughter came sharp and thin. "Confession? Please. I learned a long time ago that guilt is a luxury for men with time to feel it." That line landed like a hammer. The clipboard queen hadn't come to negotiate, she'd come to intimidate. "You lost the board, Claudia," I said. "You lost your cover story. It's over." "Not yet." Her eyes gleamed with something cold. "You forget, Marcus. I still control the insurance claim. I can reroute blame, shift liability. You'll look like a reckless saboteur. You're ex-military, right? PTSD, anger issues. It's believable." The threat hit where she aimed. I felt my jaw tighten. "You're weaponizing paperwork against a natural disaster." "No," she corrected. "I'm weaponizing perception. Same thing I've always done." Behind her, the rain thickened. Her SUV idled like a restless animal, exhaust curling around her legs. The tyrant in heels took one last step closer and whispered, "By the time I'm done, the story will be simple. Marcus Vance tried to destroy the HOA that gave him shelter, and you know what? They'll believe it." "Not this time," I said. "Oh," she smirked. "You planning to drown me too?" Before I could answer, she turned, heels crunching gravel, and disappeared into the mist. Her car rolled away, taillights shrinking like dying embers. I stood there long after she was gone, heart pounding, not from fear, but from understanding. The war had shifted from earth and water to reputation and narrative. Claudia wasn't fighting physics anymore. She was fighting psychology. By morning, her attack began. Emails flooded inboxes claiming I'd sabotaged the flood barriers. Anonymous posts accused me of altering elevation data. One even suggested I'd been bribed by rival developers, all the hallmarks of a desperate smear campaign. But it was working. Neighbors I'd helped pump water out of basements wouldn't look me in the eye. One man crossed the street when he saw me walking his way. The officer of rules had infected the neighborhood with doubt, turning truth into a contagion. Renee showed up around noon, pale and exhausted. "She's calling a press conference," she said. "Channel 7's covering it. She's claiming you were responsible for the structural collapse." I stared out the window, watching the swollen river reflect the gray sky. "Let her speak. We'll give her enough rope." Renee hesitated. "What are you planning?" I looked at my laptop. The video of her confession, the timestamps, the drone feeds, all neatly compiled, verified, and encrypted. "I'm giving her the one thing she's never faced before," I said. "Accountability." The board chair wanted a stage. I'd give her one. But this time, she wouldn't own the microphone. That evening, I contacted Victor and the county press liaison. We'd release the evidence publicly. No filters, no edits, no commentary. Just truth. The kind that didn't need embellishment. As I uploaded the files, the storm outside reignited, lightning crawling along the river's edge like veins of light. It felt poetic. Renee placed a hand on my shoulder. "You think she'll come after you again?" "She will," I said, closing the laptop. "But the difference now is, she's out of ground to stand on." When I looked outside, I could swear I saw Claudia's silhouette across the flooded street, umbrella open, face hidden in the dark, watching, waiting. The clipboard queen wasn't done. But neither was the river. By the time morning light broke through the clouds, Riverstone was buzzing with tension. The community green, half mud, half ruin, had been converted into Claudia Renshaw's stage. Reporters in ponchos set up tripods while residents huddled under umbrellas, whispering like witnesses before a trial. And there she was, the enforcer in crimson, standing in front of the collapsed Clubhouse banner as if it were still a monument instead of a warning. The clipboard queen adjusted her blazer, eyes flicking over her audience with the precision of someone measuring obedience. I watched from the edge of the crowd, hands deep in my jacket pockets, letting her have her opening act. "Good morning," Claudia began, her voice amplified by the portable mic. "I want to address the misinformation circulating about Riverstone Estates and its leadership." Misinformation. The tyrant in heels had chosen her favorite weapon, controlled language. "Our community suffered a natural disaster," she continued, "and unfortunately, one individual, Marcus Vance, has been spreading falsehoods about the HOA's efforts, attempting to discredit the board for his personal vendetta." My name hit the air like a spark. All eyes turned. Renee stiffened beside me. Claudia pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "This man tampered with safety systems and interfered with licensed contractors. His actions endangered lives. The board has filed an official report with the county sheriff." I could see her lips tremble slightly as she spoke, not from fear, but from performance. She was playing the martyr, her favorite role. Then she smiled. But as always, truth prevails. Riverstone's residents deserve peace, not paranoia. The officer of rules ended with a polite nod, signaling the end of her fiction. Cameras flashed. A few claps sounded, awkward, hesitant. That's when Victor, my friend and the county engineer, stepped forward. "You're right about one thing, Ms. Renshaw," he said loudly enough for every mic to catch. "Truth does prevail, which is why the county is here today." The murmurs grew. Claudia's mask twitched. Victor held up a flash drive. "This contains authenticated recordings from your office network and digital correspondence between you and the construction foreman. Documents proving you authorized illegal rerouting of the water boundary for personal gain." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung. The clipboard queen's composure shattered for the briefest second. "That's absurd," she snapped, voice cracking. "Those files were doctored?" Renee stepped up beside Victor, her voice steady but shaking slightly at the edges. "They weren't doctored. I worked under you, Claudia. I recorded your call myself. I watched you delete the inspection emails." The enforcer in crimson froze. Her eyes locked on Renee like a hawk spotting betrayal. "You, traitor!" "Truth isn't treason," Renee shot back. I walked forward then, the crowd parting as I approached the crumbling podium. "You wanted an audience," I said. "Here's your show." I pulled my tablet from my bag, connecting it to the portable projector. The drone footage lit up against the damaged clubhouse wall. Claudia's own commands, her signature, her voice ordering the grade reduction. Every word echoed through the speakers. Lower the barrier by 2 feet. No one checks underground retention. We'll fix it later. The line hit like thunder. Claudia lunged forward. That's private board data. You can't... I met her glare. It stopped being private when it drowned people's homes. The crowd erupted. Questions, anger, disbelief. One woman shouted, "You nearly killed my husband's workshop." Another demanded refunds. A man yelled, "You lied to all of us." The tyrant in heels stepped back, eyes darting for control that no longer existed. She tried to raise her voice, but it drowned in the noise. "This is manipulation. You don't understand?" Victor cut her off. "We understand perfectly. You broke state law." The sheriff's vehicle rolled in quietly behind the crowd. Timing couldn't have been better or worse, depending on who you asked. 2 deputies stepped out, rain beating off their hats. Claudia turned, voice trembling now, stripped of polish. "You can't arrest me. I am the board," one deputy answered flatly. "Not anymore, ma'am." As they approached, she clutched her clipboard to her chest like it could shield her from consequence. "Marcus, you vindictive. This is your doing." I didn't move. "No," I said softly. "This was nature's doing. I just recorded the evidence." The clipboard queen's heels sank slightly into the wet ground as they led her toward the cruiser. Her crimson blazer bled against the gray rain, a symbol of power dissolving back into the mud it tried to command. The crowd didn't cheer. They just watched in silence as her reflection warped across the puddles. Distorted, fragile, finally human. Renee exhaled beside me. "Is it over?" "Almost," I said. "But she's the kind who files appeals from holding cells." Victor smirked faintly. "Then we'll keep the cameras rolling." Thunder rumbled one last time, echoing over the drowned clubhouse. And for the first time since the river shifted, Riverstone Estates felt like it was breathing again. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the tension hadn't. The air above Riverstone was thick with the metallic smell of aftermath, mud, silt, and the faint bitterness of smoke from generators still humming. The clubhouse ruins, now an official investigation site, were taped off with yellow ribbon. But that didn't stop the residents from gathering again, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. They wanted answers, and this time, they wanted them face to face. The county had called for an emergency public hearing in the community square. A folding table became a courtroom, folding chairs became a gallery, and standing at the center, chin raised, was Claudia Renshaw, the board chair stripped of title but not of arrogance. The enforcer in crimson looked like a woman built from defiance and caffeine. Even under the morning haze, she wore that same blazer, creased, soaked at the cuffs, but defiantly red. Power might have been slipping, but she still knew how to weaponize posture. The moderator cleared his throat. "Ms. Renshaw, the board's financial and environmental decisions are now subject to public review. You may respond to the accusations." She didn't flinch. "Accusations?" she repeated, voice polished to a gleam. "You're treating strategic planning as if it were criminal intent. I acted in this community's best interest." A man from the audience shouted, "You flooded our homes!" Claudia smiled without humor. "And yet your property values will recover once restoration begins. You're welcome." The officer of rules had mastered the art of minimizing disaster. She spoke like a politician, rationalizing ruin. Then she turned to me. "Mr. Vance," she said, voice dripping with restrained venom, "your tampering with restricted systems is also under review. You're no hero. You're a provocateur with a drone." I stood slowly, meeting her gaze. A provocateur with evidence. Gasps stirred. Renee sat in the front row, fingers clenched around a small recorder, backup for what was already secured. The moderator gestured to me. "Mr. Vance, your statement." I stepped forward, boots sinking slightly in the wet earth. "I warned her months ago," I began, my voice steady but low. "The river wasn't the enemy. It was the truth she refused to respect. I told the board that rerouting would erode the subsoil, that the floodplain existed for a reason. But she called it paranoia." Claudia crossed her arms. "You were never an engineer of record. Your input was unsolicited." I smiled faintly. "Funny. The county used my flood models this morning to validate their lawsuit." The crowd stirred again. The clipboard queen's mask cracked ever so slightly. Renee rose quietly, eyes glistening but firm. "You knew, Claudia. You told me yourself that you'd signed off because regrading the bank saved the HOA money. You said, and I quote, 'Water obeys paperwork.'" Claudia's expression flickered with rage. "You recorded that? I lived it. The murmur became a rumble. The once loyal residents were no longer silent. One elderly woman stood up, clutching her cane. You cost us our savings, our safety, and our homes, and you're still talking like you're the victim. The tyrant in heels turned toward her accuser. Do you have any idea how hard it is to manage ungrateful homeowners, to juggle lawsuits, maintenance, budgets? You all loved me when your lawns were pristine. I stepped closer. We didn't need a queen, Claudia. We needed a leader. For the first time, her eyes flickered, not with defiance, but exhaustion. The flood, the exposure, the cameras, everything had chipped away at her armor. But before anyone could respond, the moderator's phone buzzed. He read the screen, eyes widening. Breaking notice. State environmental authorities just confirmed official charges. Misrepresentation of safety compliance and falsification of waterway permits. The air snapped with collective shock. Claudia went pale. No, that's impossible. That's not... It's over, the moderator said quietly. You're suspended from all HOA operations, pending prosecution. She looked around at the crowd, at the people who once bowed to her. Their faces were cold, unyielding. The clipboard queen was surrounded, but for the first time, truly alone. I turned to the residents. Rebuilding starts today, not with concrete, but with accountability. The applause wasn't loud. It was quiet, resolute, like a vow. Claudia trembled, clutching her clipboard one last time. Her eyes found mine. You think this is justice? She hissed. You humiliated me. No, I said evenly. You did that yourself. As deputies approached again, she whispered, You'll miss me when this place falls apart without order. I shook my head. Order built on fear isn't order. It's captivity. She was escorted away, crimson blazer fading into the morning glare. The river behind us shimmered in fragile sunlight, flowing free for the first time in years, untamed, unowned, and honest. Renee whispered beside me, It's really over. I looked toward the water, its surface glinting like glass. It's over for her, but for us, it's the start of something better. The sound of the current filled the silence, erasing her voice from Riverstone, one ripple at a time. The following week, Riverstone Estates looked like two worlds stitched. Together, the wreckage of arrogance and the rebirth of accountability. Piles of warped lumber and broken tiles sat beside fresh sandbags and new green shoots pushing through the mud. The smell of earth after rain lingered everywhere, mingled with something rarer, relief. But peace never returns without ghosts. Claudia Renshaw's arrest had splashed across every local outlet. The board chair turned scandal headline. HOA president faces environmental fraud, charges after floodgate catastrophe. The photo, her crimson blazer half-soaked, handcuffed beside the collapsed clubhouse, was already a symbol. Some called her the enforcer in crimson. Others simply called her Karma. I stood by the riverbank that morning, boots half buried in silt. The water had retreated, calm now, steady as breath. I could still see the faint outline where the redirected trench once cut through the land, a scar carved by greed and signed by paperwork. Renee joined me, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You know she's still talking, she said. From jail? She's blaming you for everything, says you doctored the evidence, that you had a vendetta. I took a slow sip. Let her talk. The river doesn't answer to liars. Renee smiled faintly. You're not planning to respond publicly? No, I said. We've already said enough. People saw the truth with their own eyes. She nodded, then looked toward the horizon where crews were starting reconstruction. The insurance team asked me to join their review committee, said they could use someone who actually reads fine print. You should do it, I said. Riverstone needs people who value integrity more than image. Her gaze softened. You think people can forgive this place? I looked down at the slow-moving current. Forgiveness isn't the problem. Forgetting is. Behind us, a few homeowners were planting new trees near the embankment. Native willows this time, not ornamental imports. One waved at me and shouted, We're naming this one Marcus Creek. I laughed despite myself. Tell them not to. The river doesn't take kindly to names. Renee grinned. Still poetic, even after all this. But my smile faded when I saw what the current was carrying. A piece of wood, polished, gold-trimmed, with familiar lettering half buried under mud. I stepped closer, pulling it from the shallows. It was the old HOA sign. Riverstone Estates, a community of order. I stared at the word order for a long moment, then set the board upright against a rock. The irony was almost biblical. That night, the board gathered for the first time without her. The temporary president, A quiet, practical woman named Janice opened the meeting in the town hall basement, the only dry structure left standing. Before we start, Janice said, I want to acknowledge the man who refused to be silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. My throat tightened slightly. I didn't do anything heroic, I said. I just listened to what the land was trying to say. The problem was, we'd all stopped listening. We let one woman's control sound like leadership. Renee added softly. The clipboard queen wasn't the river's enemy. She was her own. Heads nodded. No applause, just quiet agreement, the kind that feels like healing. Later, as people dispersed, I stayed behind, gathering the scattered documents and soaked folders. Among them was one old binder labeled Drainage Easement Revision, approved by C. Renshaw. I paused before closing it. The handwriting inside was meticulous, almost artistic. It struck me how people like Claudia confuse perfection for permanence. Outside, the night sky cleared, stars flickering above the black mirror of the river. The reflection was so still it looked painted. I walked down to the bank one last time, letting the air settle. In the distance, floodlights illuminated the remains of the Clubhouse foundation. The county planned to demolish it next week, but I'd already decided something else for that land. A memorial garden, not for her, for what we lost and what we learned. I knelt, pressing my palm into the damp soil. You took her pride, I whispered to the river, but you gave us peace. Somewhere upstream, thunder rumbled faintly, a reminder that nature remembers everything. The next morning, the news showed Claudia being escorted from a courthouse, chin still high, voice sharp as ever. This community needed order, she barked at reporters. He destroyed it. I turned off the TV. The river outside shimmered gold in the sunrise. Order built on lies, I said under my breath, was never order at all. Then I faced the camera I'd set up by my window, ready to speak not as a victim, but as someone who refused to drown quietly. If you've ever lived under people who confuse power for purpose, I began, you'll understand this story. I warned them once. They didn't listen, but the land always keeps the receipts. I looked into the lens and finished with the only call that mattered. Hit the subscribe button now. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And remember, silence feeds tyranny. Don't let your river be redirected. The current outside glimmered brighter, as if agreeing.